If you're becoming aware of the emotional impact you might be having in your communication, this video is for you. If you've seen my videos before, welcome back. If this is your first time watching my videos, my name is Ross and I'm an intuitive counselor. Today's topic is taking responsibility for your emotional wake. And you might first off be thinking, what's an emotional wake? And I'll share with you where that term came from, or at least where I came across that term. And I think it would have been like early 2006. And I was introduced to this book called Fierce Conversations by Susan Scott. And one of the many aspects of that book was this idea of emotional wake and the idea of taking responsibility for your emotional wake. And I just love that because it helped me to become aware of the emotional wake that I was creating. And so let's just pause and I'll identify and define what is an emotional wake. And probably the best way to describe this would be to think about the wake that is left behind a boat. And it's funny because recently I was sitting on the shoreline of the lake and a boat went by, and I was very surprised by the amount of impact that that boat going by had on the shoreline and the waves that came in and how intense they were. And so that is the wake that is left behind with a boat. And it also reminds me of a story here in BC. I'm up in Canada in British Columbia, and years ago, they introduced these fast ferries that would run between the mainland and Vancouver Island. And they actually stopped running these ferries because of the wake that they left behind and the impact it was having on the shoreline and the environment. So they actually stopped running these ferries and sold them off. So our emotional wake is the impact that we leave behind in our communication with others, the impact that we have emotionally on the people surrounding us when we're having um, things come up for us or things that are coming up in relationship. And that is something that is interesting because when we're in a state of fight or flight, which is often the case when we're in conflict, we're not aware of what's going on around us. We're very much aware of our internal experience. To some extent, we become quite blind to what's going on in front of us, and we don't really notice perhaps what's going on for the person in front of us that is the receiver of that energy. And essentially that's what it is. When we are leaving an emotional wake, we're having an energetic impact on the person that we're relating with. And this can be in intimate relationships, it can be with family, like we can have this impact on our children. It can be with our coworkers, it can be with the people we interact with in customer service. An interesting side note about customer service is that sometimes that's a convenient way to discharge energy. So often when I'm talking to clients that don't really feel like they're angry or sharing that anger, they don't realize that it's coming out sideways. And the thing about emotion is that it's energy in motion, and it wants to move. And so what happens is that we unconsciously discharge that energy out into our relationships without realizing that we're doing it and without being conscious of it. And then we tell ourselves that, oh, I don't do things like that. And we deny that that's actually happening. And yet really we need to move that energy. And so it's moving and we're creating this impact. We're creating an emotional wake. So this video is for those of you that are starting to become aware of that way of being. And you might be noticing that or getting feedback from the people in your relationships that they're not okay with the impact that you're having, and they're not okay with your emotional wake, and they might be pushing back towards you and asking you to take responsibility for the impact that you're having. And I can attest for myself that there was times when I would discharge anger in communication and say things I didn't mean and have a tremendous impact. It happened with my children as well at times where I would get quite frustrated and angry, and it's interesting because a lot of people who know me wouldn't really know that about myself because in most parts of my life I was able to be composed and be able to contain those emotions. but every once in a while it would come out and it would get, it would have an impact, which I was not feeling good about. And so when you start to become aware of your emotional wake, you also start to become aware of the guilt and shame that comes along with it, because it's often, um, you don't feel good about the impact you're having when you start to notice. And when you're not in a state of fight or flight, when you start to become aware, then you start to see the other person in front of you, and you start to be able to notice their body language and what is happening for them. And then you can start to take responsibility. So this isn't something that, as with many things, this is not something that changes overnight. It's something that takes time. And ultimately, taking responsibility for your emotional wake means looking in the mirror and being honest with yourself and bringing awareness to what is going on, and ultimately starting to reconcile, like, what's going on underneath? Like, why is there anger underneath? Why is this energy happening? Why is there so much wanting to move through me? And often it's because we're pushing down something that is wanting to surface. And when we get to that place of recognizing that, that's when we need to usually ask for help or find some resources and ways of working with that energy. And for me, one of the things that worked really well was a men's group or a support group, anywhere where you can start to share your story and start to speak about it. Because the moment we start speaking about it and sharing it, that one thing alone makes it be more real. Brings it into reality and allows us to work with it and take action. So I think I'll leave it there. Just wanted to again introduce this topic, create some thoughts for you to work with, and hopefully it's helpful in some way. So thanks so much for taking the time to watch. If you like the video, please hit like. If you think of someone that can benefit from this video, please consider sharing it. If you have ideas of topics that you would like me to focus on in future videos, please drop those into the comments, because I would love to respond to your requests of video ideas. And if you're interested in the work I do as an intuitive counselor, you can go to my website. The link is in the description below. So once again, thanks for watching. I look forward to seeing you again next time, and I'm wishing you unconditional love.